Good afternoon. Welcome to those of you alumni attending the Tuskegee University 2021 Virtual Founders Day weekend who have joined us here today to talk about charitable plan giving. I'm Jeff Winnick, and I'm a Senior Wealth Strategist with Regions Private Wealth Management. If I'm familiar to some of you, I've presented in the past during other Founders Day weekends and at your National Alumni event in Las Vegas. I'm glad to be back to present today, and I'm joined by Ann Dalton, one of our wealth advisors based out of our Montgomery, Alabama office.
Thank you, Jeff. Yes, my name is Ann Farrell Dalton. I am a wealth advisor in Montgomery, Alabama, and I would like to take a quick second just to thank Crystal Floyd, Kimberly Holland, and Philip Howard for providing us with the opportunity to speak to you today, to share some ideas and strategies that we hope help each of you find the best way that you can give back to Tuskegee while fitting into your other lifetime goals and your family needs. Jeff, why don't you tell our participants today a little bit more about what they can expect?
All right, we'll do so, Ann. Thanks. First, a few formalities. Today's session is for educational purposes and does not represent advice or recommendations made by Regions Bank, Ann, or myself, and is not to be construed as legal or tax advice. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about what to expect during today's presentation. Today, we'll be talking about ways to enhance your planned giving at Tuskegee University. For some of you, writing an annual check remains the best way to give. But for those of you who might be interested in exploring ways to give with greater tax efficiency and greater purpose, we hope some of the ideas we share with you today can help you achieve these larger picture goals. Next, Ann has some housekeeping items to go over. Ann?
Thank you. So today's presentation should last around between 45 minutes and 1 hour. We are being taped, so we understand that you may have questions that are not addressed or that may be specific to your own personal circumstances. So if you would please contact Crystal Floyd or Kimberly Holland with the university, either of them should be able to forward your questions to us and we'll be glad to respond. Jeff, let me turn it over to you to go over today's agenda in a little more detail.
All right. Thanks, Ann. So, for today, our presentation will cover several topics. Ann will first cover what we refer to as holistic approaches to planning. One reason gifts to charities and educational institutions may be overlooked is because charitable giving has not been integrated into the overall financial plan. Ann is going to share some ways you can combine personal planning with planned charitable giving. Next, Ann will talk about the intangible aspects of planned giving. While the financial impact and tax benefits of giving are important, a donor's passion and purpose for the gift and knowing that the gift in some way makes a difference can be just as important. Ann will next go over some of the basic giving techniques, and then I'll pick it up from there with charitable planning using IRAs, followed by some estate planning considerations, and then a little bit about charitable trust to achieve planning giving objectives. Ann, I'll give it to you to take up from here.
Thanks, Jeff. So as a wealth advisor, I have the opportunity to work with people at different phases of their life, with each requiring a slightly different approach to financial planning. For retirees, there's the added challenge of knowing that they're on a fixed income. That makes it even more important for us to think ahead when we're talking about how to best fit charitable giving into their cash flow planning for retirement. So we take a holistic approach or an all-encompassing approach to wealth planning. Let's talk a little bit more about what that actually looks like with a client relationship. So when we get to know a new family or a new individual, we try to learn more about each of their unique circumstances of their family. We learn about their dynamics. We learn if there are any special needs or considerations that we should know about. We help them establish personal and financial goals, both short and long term. And we determine primary areas of concern that are unique for them, as well as prioritize their goals. We do try to identify all of their present and future financial resources and discuss their lifestyle, their regular and periodic expenses, and of course the possibility of future major expenses. And then we discuss how charitable donations might best fit into their overall plan. So as you can see, we take a holistic approach, starting with the big picture. We look at retirement planning, particularly cash flow planning. We look at their estate plan, meaning what happens to their assets after their death, how do they want them to pass. We talk about charitable planning and we integrate that into their strategy. We look at mitigation of risk and determine, what is out there that could potentially create bumps in the road for them. And we pull it all together from there. So some considerations for charitable plan giving that we typically see are what's the level of financial resources that is available for a particular individual or family to achieve their overall personal and family goals. What are their life priorities? What's their philosophy around inheritance, or what is their philosophy around philanthropy? As I mentioned earlier, we look at their individual family dynamics. Do they have family members with special needs or relevant disabilities that we should know about? What are their cash flow needs in retirement? Can they afford to give? And if so, how much and with what type of frequency? We look at an adequate financial buffer, meaning what do they have in place to sort of protect them from foreseen and unforeseen contingencies or issues in the future. We look at the likelihood of their financial resources possibly changing in retirement, or for example, if they're still working, what if they were to lose their job prior to retirement? How does that affect their plan? A lot of times we talk to families and individuals about their personal health history and their prospects for longevity. For example, we can develop a plan that goes out to age 105, but if the client tells us no one in their families lived past 85, a lot of times they want us to revise that. We talk about reserves, financial reserves for children or grandchildren or other family members that may have changing life circumstances that might require some support in the future. We talk about how important it is to an individual to fund future, purchases or expenses for family members, such as, a wedding, or do they want to provide some type of funding for education for their grandchildren. And of course, we talk about the planning for the possibility of future disability or incapacity. Do they have long-term care insurance, or do they have the availability for family care options within their home? So we work with our individuals and families to integrate their personal planning goals with their charitable legacy goals so that we don't compromise either of their objectives. So in the next slide, we talk about why we see people give. Some common considerations when giving are a passion for a particular cause or a personal connection to a charity or to an institution. Oftentimes, we see individuals who give to charities that they share values with. They also give to establish a personal or a charitable legacy. And then we see individuals and families who are looking to give because it creates tax advantages for them, or also because they can create wealth transfer strategies, or it fits uniquely into their estate plan. So next, we talk about a lot of times when we're having conversations, giving during an individual's lifetime versus testamentary giving, meaning giving after their death, or gifts that are made under their will or through a trust. A lot of times, lifetime givers are really looking to inspire or influence or guide, maybe in the case of Tuskegee, maybe to help a student who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford to go to an institution like Tuskegee. And they look a lot of times to see the fruits of that gift during their lifetime. Testamentary giving, we see more of people looking to memorialize their generosity. Maybe they're funding research for a particular area of interest to them, or they're focused on advancing arts or culture or education, or just looking for a way to benefit their community. Sometimes people have a real affinity for a particular department within a university, and they're looking to fund possibly a chair so that The university would have additional resources to attract key talent. So there are just a lot of ways that people look to use their gifts and talents to advance some of their charitable objectives. So let's talk about some basic charitable giving strategies. Many of you are probably familiar with these, but we'll go through them in a little bit of detail just in case. Some of you listening may have made an outright cash gift to the university or to a charity you're passionate about, and you may have written a check or given some sort of cash donation to the university and taken a tax deduction for it. Something to remember is many employers, if you're working, offer a matching gift program. So be sure to explore that if you're tied to a business. If you are not working or you're retired, if you do a little bit of research, there are a lot of public and private entities that offer matching gifts programs. So that's also something you could explore. Moving to non-cash asset types. Real estate is an asset type that is often considered when people are making charitable gifts. It's important to remember that that can be your personal residence. It could be a vacation home. It could be commercial property or timberland or farmland, something of that nature. So important to remember all of those different types of real estate when you're incorporating or building out your financial plan. Something else that's frequently given are securities, meaning stocks and bonds, particularly appreciated securities. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But something else to think about are retirement plan accounts, 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, any sort of employer-sponsored plan. Something to remember, you don't have to give 100% of that particular account. You can give a much smaller percentage. So don't forget, you could give 10% rather than 100. So it's something else to consider. Privately held business interest. If you're a business owner and you're looking to make a gift, either during your lifetime or at your death, all or a portion of your business interest, we would suggest you discuss with your attorney and your planned giving officer, but it's definitely something that can be done and something that we have people inquire about. So don't forget that. Tangible personal property is another frequently gifted item. We have art, we see collectibles, cars, antiques, anything like that. And then of course, unique assets such as royalties, patents, commodities, or other business interest, mineral rights or oil and gas royalties that also would be frequently gifted. So let's talk a little bit more about gifts of appreciated stock, in this case, securities. You can see on the screen in this example, we have an individual who bought stock for a purchase price of $10,000. And over the course of their lifetime, the stock appreciated to become worth $100,000. So in this case, the individual made a $100,000 gift to Tuskegee or to the charity of their choice, and they were able to take an income tax deduction for that gift of $100,000. The university is able to sell the stock and pay no taxes on the $90,000 capital gain. And if the individual had held on to the stock and sold it in their lifetime, they would be responsible for the capital gains that accumulated over their lifetime. So that's a very frequently overlooked strategy that can make a lot of sense for people. Moving on to different types of assets that can be considered. Life insurance, annuities, company retirement accounts, IRAs, bank accounts, brokerage accounts. All of these account types, what do they have in common, you may ask? They all can be passed by beneficiary designation. So that means they pass outside of your will. So you need to be careful not to duplicate provisions in your will or trust to fund a bequest or to make a gift to a charity, and then also duplicate that gift by naming them as a beneficiary on one of these types of accounts. So one thing to remember in this area is generally you don't have much control or capacity to restrict the use of the funds when you give in this manner. So if you're looking to advise how they're to be used, this may not be the best vehicle. And as always, you should consider whether or not making a gift of one of these types of assets makes sense in your overall estate plan versus making gifts from other asset classes or other areas of your estate. So let's talk a little bit about the life insurance legacy strategy. I think this is a really common way that a lot of times people want to give back to charities they're passionate about. One way is where an individual or couple owns a policy on themselves, and they pay the premiums themselves, and they name Tuskegee University or a charity of their choosing as the beneficiary. In this case, Tuskegee or their charity only collects the proceeds when either the first or second to die, depending on the type of policy they have, actually is deceased. One other I guess sometimes overlooked strategy or way of using insurance is making a gift of an existing policy that you may own on yourself to the university, or authorizing the university to purchase a policy on your life. In this scenario, the university owns the policy, they pay the premiums, and they receive the death proceeds when you pass away. So this is another method to consider. So moving on, let's see, we're getting to charitable giving with IRAs. Jeff, I think I'll turn it over to you here.
Thanks, Ann. I think that hopefully you've seen by now that one of the messages we have for all of you is to try to find when there is a tax efficient way to give. And if you can avoid paying income taxes and let instead Tuskegee University benefit from the entire amount, being a not-for-profit organization, that's ideal. And one of the best ways to do that is using your IRA. Now, I know a lot of you watching today are probably retired and have those IRAs that you've rolled over from your working years. I'm sure by now all of you know who are in retirement that they pushed back the age at which you have to start taking out required minimum distributions to age 72 from age 70 and a half. But let's say you've reached age 72. What are ways that you can use this IRA that you may not be aware of for your benefit? Several years ago, Congress passed a law which allowed, and has continued on, which is allow an IRA owner who's reached the age of minimum distributions, now 72, to be able to take money out of that IRA and have it count toward the required minimum distribution, but have it directed to a charitable organization like Tuskegee University. And there's a limit on that, which is up to $100,000 as the amount that can be taken out. But if you follow the process properly, which is to contact your IRA custodian or the transfer agent or trustee and tell them to send up to $100,000 to Tuskegee University, as long as your minimum required minimum distribution is covered within that $100,000, then none of that money that's within the minimum distribution amount is taxable to either you or to the university. And not only that, it's not even reportable as taxable income. The key to remember is if your required minimum distribution is only $20,000, you can't direct $100,000 and have the same result. You're limited to that $20,000, the amount of required minimum distribution. It doesn't mean that the amount over that can't benefit Tuskegee University, but it's still reportable as tax over $20,000 in that example. And so let me go ahead and give you another actual example that we have in the slides to kind of put that together for you. So in my case study here, Rose has consistently made generous annual gifts to Tuskegee University. Now she's age 72 and she wants to continue making substantial gifts. And we've determined that her required minimum distribution is $30,000 for the current tax year. We've also done some financial planning with her and look at her cash flow needs and realized that she has enough other investments that she doesn't really need to take that required minimum distribution out of the IRA if she could avoid it. She has sufficient pension and other income sources to meet her cash flow needs. So let's say that instead, she goes ahead and directs her IRA custodian or trustee to direct that $30,000 directly to Tuskegee University. The following will be the result. $30,000 can be used to satisfy her RMD requirement. We will save on federal and state income taxes that will not be even reportable and make a significant tax-efficient gift to Tuskegee University. So all things being equal, if you do have an IRA that requires minimum distributions and yet a choice of either writing a check or taking money out of the IRA without having any reportable taxable income, obviously it's a better choice to take money out of the IRA. A little more complex, obviously, but it's a much more tax-efficient way of giving. So let's now move to some of the estate planning considerations involved with planned charitable giving. First, a quick review for all of you, just to make sure that any of you that don't have a last will and testament, we encourage you to make sure you have one. Even if you have assets that have beneficiary designations on them, there's always a need potentially to have a will that directs other things that you might not be thinking about to your heirs and your beneficiaries. Some of you may also have a living trust or a revocable living trust that passes assets as well. And that can work in conjunction with a will. And there's also the durable financial and healthcare powers of attorney. This is a great document in case you become incapacitated to allow somebody to continue handling your financial matters for you and make healthcare decisions. How it relates to planned giving is that if you had a pattern, in my example before with Rose, who was giving $30,000 a year, and she becomes incapacitated, the power of attorney gives that person who holds it the power to continue those gifts if it's authorized within the document itself. There's also a healthcare directive. We commonly call that a living will as well, to be able to give directions of what happens if you're at an end stage life condition or terminal illness. And then also don't forget about making sure that somebody is authorized under HIPAA to have access to your medical information if you're incapacitated. If you're married, most likely it's your spouse, or if not, it might be one of your children. The other thing often overlooked is what they call a pre-need designation of guardian. We all know that, even though you might have a power of attorney, some people's family circumstances are a little bit more complex, and it may require the best way of handling is through a court-appointed guardian. And sometimes by having a pre-need designation, that's already been determined by you as to who your first choice would be. And lastly, of course, are funeral instructions. And in particular, if you are looking to make any type of anatomical gifts at your death, to make sure that those are included in your funeral instructions as well, or under a separate document. So let's talk a little bit about using a will or trust to make charitable bequests at your death. Ann talked about earlier the use of beneficiary designations for many of the common investment vehicles that you all owned. That might be the 401k plan if you're still working, or 403b. It might be the IRAs. You have life insurance, you have annuities. All these have, as Ann pointed out, the commonality of being able to pass by beneficiary designation. But what they all lack is the ability to have it directed in any particular special way for Tuskegee University to use it. It would generally just go into the general fund, which is great. That's good for the planned giving department. They'll see the best use of it. The university knows how to use those funds. But let's say that you had a passion for something more specific. An example of that might be that you want to benefit a particular department. You want to increase certain resources at the library. Maybe it's for a building fund to be able to contribute to improve one of the buildings or do some repairs. It might be for different lab equipment. Maybe it's for being able to fund some type of field trip for students annually. And of course, there's always scholarships for individuals, and you may have certain requirements that you want as to what minimum grade point average, what type of specialty that they're going to major in for their college degree. And these are all things that could be spelled out in a will or trust. And the other thing is sometimes you want to make it a contingent, gift. And it may be that it only is given to Tuskegee University, as example, if your spouse deceases before you. Or sometimes some of the individuals we help will create a trust for their children that might last 10 or 20 years at their death and give an income stream. And then at the end of that time period, then it goes to Tuskegee University. The point is that doing charitable giving at death, what we call legacy giving, doing that through a will or trust can give you a lot more flexibility and allow you to add a lot more details than just by putting Tuskegee University as the beneficiary of one of the other vehicles we talked about. Of course, there's no tax advantage the same way as it would be using an IRA, for example, but you get a lot more control into the outcome of what you're trying to achieve. All right, let me talk a little bit about charitable trust. Some of you may be familiar with or heard about the use of charitable trust, and we find a lot of the clients that we work with like to use charitable trust because it's a way of being able to what we call split an asset so that it is able to continue to provide you an income stream during your lifetime, and then only at your death or after a defined period of time does it go to Tuskegee University. Just to give you an example of how that would work. Let's say that I created a charitable trust. I funded it with a certain amount of stocks that I put in there. Those stocks have maybe appreciated. Same as Ann talked about, a charitable trust has the ability to sell that stock and defer capital gains so that you don't have to pay capital gains immediately if it's sold through the charitable trust. Some of you may have some high concentration of stock that you've had for a long time and you're not selling it because you don't want to pay the capital gains. But this is one way for you to be able to diversify away from that stock, sell it, and then spread out the capital gains gradually over your lifetime or the period of the trust. So now what happens is the trust is set up to give you or you and your spouse an income stream for either a period of years or life. It has to be no less than 5%. You also get a tax deduction for the fact that you've earmarked these funds for Tuskegee University or other charity. And at the end of the trust term, it goes tax-free to Tuskegee University. It's a great way to leave money to a charity or a university or your alma mater. Now, what we like a lot about this, if you're a planned giving department, is that, knowing that this is set up, you've created a legacy for yourself, and it's something that they can maybe count on in the future. It's uncertain as to when they may receive that, but it gives you some notoriety, the fact that you've created this trust, and it's a commitment for the future. And it's good for you to be recognized for that, and at the same time, it gives some type of certainty or guarantees to the university about what they may receive in the future. It tends to be a win-win. Now, you can draft a charitable remainder trust, as we call it, with the ability to change the beneficiaries. So I want to make sure you know that. But in many instances, we find that naming the charitable beneficiary as an irrevocable designation is a win-win for all concerned, and it works well into a lot of people's legacy planning. So let me talk next about what we refer to as a charitable lead trust. Charitable lead trust is kind of the opposite of a remainder trust. In a charitable remainder trust, to remind you, it's that you have the income benefit during your lifetime, and it's at the end that the remainder goes to a charity. In a lead trust, it's the charity that leads with the benefits, with the remainder coming back to you and your family. So that can provide immediate benefits to Tuskegee University, knowing though that the asset ultimately comes back to you and your family. Here's a perfect example of that. Example might be that you own a rental property that's has some nice rent net rent that comes off of it, and maybe you don't need that right now. You're approaching retirement and something that you don't need, but you've talked to Planned Giving Department, Kimberly or Crystal, and find out that hey, that rent could really make a difference right now and be helpful on something they're trying to do short term over the next 5 or 10 years. It's almost like you're lending the asset to the university to use, but at the end of that trust term, it comes back to you and your family, or at least some portion. Depends on the structure of the trust. It may be that some of it remains with the university, some of it comes back to you. But again, it's just another tool that can be used. So let me kind of summarize what we've just talked about today, and say that what we encourage you to do is to, first of all, look at your overall financial situation and look at your cash flow needs. Think about the family dynamics. Think about what you really need to leave to your family at death. And a lot of times people don't think they can afford to make a more substantial gift, but when they recognize that there could be potential tax benefits that could help, when they realize that they can use trust or they can use beneficiary designations at death, if you include that into the overall plan, they'll find that there can be a way that you can just figure out how to make that charitable gift that you didn't think existed before. And we encourage you to talk to Tuskegee University and the Plan Giving Department, to Kimberly and Crystal, because they can help you try to figure this all out. And it can be a win-win for everybody. So I want to turn it over to Ann at this point. Ann, if you have any closing comments, and I'll close it out.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Well, we just want to thank you all again for the opportunity to be here with you today as part of Founders Day, and very much enjoy being able to be a part of this. And we want to encourage you, if you have questions or unique situations that you like to discuss in more detail, please let Crystal or Kimberly know, and they will get us in contact with you to discuss it further. I think Jeff and I have both mentioned this several times, but every situation is different and unique. And so we encourage you to just talk to your own advisors if you have them, your attorneys, your accountants, financial planners or investment managers, and really work with them to develop a plan that makes sense for you. Every situation is different, and it's definitely not a one size fits all. So thank you again for letting us be a part of this. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I say thank you as well. And Ann, Ann and I both hope that we've given you some ideas today that you could take away and help you formulate, let's call it a longer term giving strategy to the university. And in addition, we hope that you enjoy the rest of your time participating in the virtual Founders Day event. So thank you again for participating in our presentation today. Thank you.